some background of your wife's time in policing, where she worked, how long she was on, etc.?
Cindy joined the OPP in April of 1998. She started in New Liskeard, which is north of North Bay. And then after about a year and a half, she joined the undercover drug unit. And she was on that unit for about a year, at which point she returned to the road in Elgin County. And she policed there for approximately 3 years. And then at which point she moved to Caledon East up by Orangeville. And that's where she was until she passed away.
Okay. When and how did you notice your wife wasn't herself?
Well, I noticed after the birth of our second daughter. I mean, there had been signs before that, but I really noticed after the birth of our second daughter. And she started to become angry. She seemed to engage in more reckless behaviors. She started drinking alcohol heavily. She lost a lot of weight. She started staying up all night, very chaotic types of behaviors, spending a lot of money. Her work was really suffering. I know that she was getting in conflicts with her coworkers, and over a period of probably 6 or 7 months is when she very rapidly deteriorated. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, I can look back and see that these behaviors had been happening for a long time. But they were always isolated enough, and there wasn't really, for me, there wasn't enough context behind them to identify that it was a sort of an ongoing pattern of behavior. And I think that my natural inclination was to want things to be good and return to the status quo, so I probably overlooked them. And I was a lot younger, right? So, but yeah, after the birth of our second daughter, things deteriorated very quickly.
What was she diagnosed with?
So she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, she was what was called rapid cycling, which meant that she would have manic and depressive episodes, sometimes multiple times throughout the day, and then other times though it would really vary, right? But it would sometimes the manic episodes would last months, and the depressive episodes would last months. But yes, diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Did she tell anyone at work about her diagnosis?
Absolutely not. In fact, at the beginning, so she originally went off work, I think in February of 2006, around that time period, and it was seen at the time, and I think probably she wanted to portray that it was a problem with alcohol. So one of the things she was doing was she was trying to calm her chaotic mind with alcohol and prescription anti-anxiety medication and that kind of stuff. And so her supervisors assumed that when she went off work, it was really an issue with alcohol because she was drinking. And I think she may have made that sort of known because I think she wanted to believe that's what was the issue. But as far as her supervisors did come over to her house, or to our house, and tried to help her when they thought it was a problem with alcohol. And when they realized that it was not that, it was really just talk to EAP, right? So she never told anybody, as far as I know, she never told anybody at work that she was suffering with bipolar disorder.
Okay. Even though she didn't tell anyone, do you think her coworkers knew?
I don't know that they knew that she was dealing with bipolar disorder, but they certainly knew there was a problem, because at her funeral, a number of them came up to me and told me that quite clearly that they knew that something was very wrong, and they had known that something was wrong for a long time. And it was actually that led me to contact the OBP and has resulted in me being here today. So they told me that they thought she had tried to commit suicide while she was working. At one point shortly before her death, that they, that it was a struggle to deal with her on those times she was working. Most of the time she was on disability, but there were various times she tried to go back and because it was very important to her. She identified as a police officer, and she wanted to be back at work. So I know she could be an issue to deal with, talking to her sergeant after, and some of her coworkers. So again, I don't think they knew that it was bipolar disorder, unless perhaps some of them had firsthand experience with the illness, but they knew there was something seriously wrong, and nobody said anything.
Okay. So why don't you think of course, her coworkers said something at the funeral
Mhm.
afterwards. So why don't you think they came, especially when they told you about her in the driving?
Mhm.
Why don't you think anything was said prior to that?
Because I think the culture is one of we don't openly discuss these issues, and if we do, the perception is that your career, any hope of career advancement is over. And I think the risk of sort of inflicting that on someone was perceived as greater than the benefit of speaking up, to be honest. So I think it was based on the culture and the organization and the history, I think it was a cost-benefit analysis, and the wrong choices were made.
Can you just talk about again what you think her behaviors actually fooled her supervisor?
Yeah, I'm not sure that her behaviors fooled her supervisors. I think that her supervisors, in certain respects, didn't want to know. So I don't think that she needed to fool anybody. I think that they just chose not to acknowledge the problem for what it was. But on the flip side, she was off work a lot. So again, she knew that there was something wrong, or they knew rather that there was something wrong. But I don't think she was, explicitly trying to fool them. I think that there is a process. I'm sure they at some point knew that she was dealing with some type of mental illness issue. And from what I could see, once that determination is made, there is no role for a supervisor or coworker to play, because there is an outside organization in EAP to deal with it, right? So I don't think it's a question of fooling. I think it's just how the organization handles people in that situation.
Okay. Do you think that the coworkers trying to shelter her and not bring up any issues that they saw actually did more damage than good?
Just address Beth.
Yep. That's a great question. I think that it did damage in the sense that it reinforced what she perceived to be true about the culture. So in other words, why are they trying, if they're trying to shelter me in this way, then they must know that not sheltering me would place me at risk of some type of negative repercussion. So yeah, I think it did. I think it did make things worse, for sure.
This question isn't in there, but I can ask it. So just wing it.
Yeah.
So would you also say maybe the organization, or even her coworkers, just that lack of education regarding mental health and how to talk to people, or do you think more it's just the police culture, or a combination of both? Or
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, I think that the culture is one where, vulnerability is seen as weakness, and so I think that contributed to it, and I think that's really the foundation on which any type of education or evolution needs to be built. Otherwise, it will never gain any traction, right? Because you can educate people all you want, but if there is a belief that there are repercussions that people can face for dealing with this, then it's wasted, right? So I think it is a combination of both, but I think that the culture is the underlying foundation that needs to be strengthened first.
as a spouse, did you know where to turn when this was going on?
No, I did not actually, and I found a lot of it. All I knew was that I would not turn to anybody within the policing family because Cindy she expressly forbade that, actually. There was no way she was going to allow me to do that. So I was left to kind of muddle through on my own, I guess. I reached out. I mean, thankfully it was in the time when we had the internet, so I could research about bipolar and what organizations were there to support people with bipolar, and I ended up going to the Canadian Mental Health Association, which was a huge benefit to me as far as just being there to listen to me and to help me understand what was going on. And that was really all I personally needed, but no one from the OPP ever contacted me, either to talk or offer any type of support. So it's hard for me to answer that. I don't know what I would have needed, but I just know that whatever I did find, I found on my own.
I think if the next question is, how did the police culture hinder her coming forward? I think you pretty much talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your advice for police officers moving forward?
I think my advice for police officers moving forward is to not look at this as an issue of, not to narrowly focus this on the issue of mental illness. I think it's really about a choice we make in how we choose to live our lives. So, and what I mean by that is, making the choice to be vulnerable and understand that we are all human beings, whether we're police officers or not, and that we struggle and we deal with challenges, and that the best way to overcome them is by being as open as possible about them, because that will help others that are in the same boat feel safe and connect with us. And that's life, and that's reality, and it has really nothing to do, in my view, it has nothing to do with policing, and it has nothing to do with mental illness. It's really just a choice we make about how to connect with those people around us. So I guess that would be my advice.
Okay, so would it be fair to say then, if police officers are having issues, that it's okay then to reach out for professional help or talk to peer support? Or
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I think I would encourage them, everybody, to do that. And I really think that it's very important that the leaders of the organization, it's important that it comes from the grassroots level, obviously, but it's important for the leaders of the organization to live and breathe that message as well. When Cindy, I just know that if she had opened up, well, she did have some sort of interaction with her staff sergeant, for example, and the result was to basically shuffle her off to EAP. And I wonder what would have happened if that particular staff sergeant had opened up and said, I don't know specifically what you're going through, but I've struggled too. And here's how I dealt with it, and here's how the police family reacted, and here's what I advise you, and no, I'm not judging you, and you're welcome back, and we want to support you. Like, those conversations never happened, and I think that if they had, I don't know that it would change the outcome, but what I do know is that Cindy's fear of reintegrating into the police culture made everything much worse, because for all of the struggles she was facing and the challenges that she was dealing with, that was just something else on top of that, that if that wasn't there, or that wasn't a factor, it only would have made things easier for her. So again, I don't know that it would have changed the outcome, but it couldn't have hurt.
how do you wish Cindy's coworkers would have responded to her cries for help?
I wish they would have created the environment where her cries for help would have been heard, actually, is probably something a little bit more proactive. But, to answer your question directly, I would say that I wish they had said something. I don't know to who, and I don't know what they should have said, but saying it to me at her funeral was too late. And, yeah.
Okay, 11's kind of the same. When you called 911 for assistance and a neighboring police agency responded, how do you wish the call could have been handled differently?
So, actually, we should probably stop there. I should have mentioned this at the beginning. So, actually, she called.
Oh, she called?
Yeah, so, just to...
Oh, yeah, because she was trying to leave.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, right?
Yeah.
I forgot.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So, I don't know if we want to say it in a different...
Okay.
Okay. So, Cindy was in a lot of distress. This was February of 2006, and she had decided that she was going to pack up all her stuff and move away. She felt a need to reconnect with her family 3 hours away. I was obviously not support of this idea for obvious reasons, and she had been up for days. She was heavily intoxicated. So she called the Orangeville Police Service because she thought I was, rightfully so, that I was going to try to prevent her from leaving the house. And so they showed up, and this was one of the moments of many moments that I've probably felt the most helpless, because two officers showed up, and all they could tell me was, if you, in our presence, take the car keys from Cindy's hand, that you're assaulting her. Like, you'll be charged with assault. And I've thought about that so many times since that happened, and I think, police officers, first of all, these two police officers knew Cindy, and while they may not have known the specifics, one of them definitely knew the specifics, because she had been having interactions with him over the course of the past number of months. And so, police officers are highly educated, highly trained people that use their discretion all the time to make decisions in the in the heat of the moment or whatever. And for him to fall back on some sort of canned response like that, when she was clearly in distress and I was clearly only trying to help her, and I was clearly in distress too, really, I don't know. I don't know how differently it could have been handled, considering the constraints that police officers are placed under exactly, but it could have been handled differently than that. And it really was a very crushing moment, I would say. I felt very, very helpless.
So it was almost like a brotherhood,
Yep.
sisterhood. They saw that as protecting her, as opposed to, recognizing that there was an issue and that something needed to be done.
That's
right?
exactly what it was. And isn't that tragically ironic, that they felt they were protecting her by not even encouraging her to get help.
Right.
And then when, that's exactly what they did. And they just took her and dropped her off at the mall, actually, is what they did. So,
Wow.
Yeah, that was it.
I'm just going to go back, just thinking of this when you were talking. When you said she was diagnosed, she was given medication,
Mm-hmm.
right? Did she ever seek therapy, or?
Yeah.
She did?
Yeah, so Cindy tried to, she fought the illness to the end. So she was given all kinds of different medications. So that was another thing that was very isolating, I would say, is that, I had this idea of psychiatry, and it was really just 15 minutes a month of try this medication. Okay, how about this one? We'll combine these ones, and that was I think the treatment was as bad as the illness, to be honest with you, in some cases. So, but to her credit, she tried everything to try to get better. So she was institutionalized at one point, and she was Form 1, but it was voluntary, because it was the only way to get her the help that she needed. So, and she went through, behavioral therapy, and she did electroshock therapy and meditation and yoga, and she saw, like spiritual counselors. She saw naturopathic doctors. She really explored every option available to her to try to get well.
So they say hindsight's 20/20. If you have the knowledge and skills that you have now, what would you do differently?
I ask myself this question a lot, and I've really never come up with a satisfactory answer. I guess the only thing that I would say is that I would try to not see her as just a person with mental illness. So near the end, after so many days, or so many years, and so many different things that happened, and so much tragedy and heartbreak and chaos, I lost the ability to see her as a human being, and I really just saw her as somebody that was mentally ill. And I saw every action that she took and every word that she said through that prism, and that prism only. And I would try to not do that, I guess. But I don't know if anything that I've learned or since that time would have changed the outcome. I don't know. I don't know if I would be stronger. I don't know.
Do you think if the organization had better supports in place or anything different that way, do you think it would have made a difference?
It's hard to say, but again, it could only have helped, right? So I don't know to what degree it would help, but as I said earlier, the stress and anxiety of trying to return to an organization where she knew in her heart that she would be ostracized only made things worse.